Please do not take me back. I would rather freeze out here than go with them. The little girl's voice cracked like thin ice under pressure, her small body trembling as she stumbled backward across the empty stretch of roadside gravel, her wide eyes locked on the towering biker who had just stepped off his roaring Harley-Davidson. The engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound breaking the silence of the cold desert morning. Jake Reaper Morrison froze mid-step, his heavy boots grinding against the dirt as he raised his hands slightly, palms open, showing no threat. The wind cut across the highway, carrying dust and the faint smell of burnt rubber from somewhere unseen. The girl could not have been older than 8 years old, her thin jacket torn at the sleeve, her knees scraped, her breath coming in sharp, panicked bursts. She shook her head violently, as if trying to erase his presence, her voice rising again, desperate and raw. Stay away from me. Jake had seen fear before. He had lived in it, breathed it, carried it home from places most men could not even name. But this was different. This was not fear of him. This was fear of something worse. He slowly bent one knee, lowering himself to her level without stepping closer, his massive frame suddenly less imposing against the wide, open sky. His leather vest creaked softly as he shifted, the Hell's Angels patch on his back catching the morning light like a warning sign to the world. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The road stretched for miles in both directions, empty, silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. Jake studied the ground around her, his trained eyes catching details others would miss. Faint tire marks cut sharply off the asphalt, scattered footprints, too many for just one child, a drag mark that disappeared into the dirt before stopping abruptly. His jaw tightened, a familiar tension building in his chest. This was not a simple accident. This was something darker, something unfinished. The girl's gaze flickered past him for a split second, and Jake caught it. That instinctive glance over his shoulder, the kind that came from someone who expected danger to return at any moment. Slowly, deliberately, Jake reached up and pulled off his heavy leather jacket. The movement made the girl flinch, her body tensing as if she might bolt, but he did not step toward her. Instead, he placed the jacket gently on the ground between them, then leaned back, giving her space, his voice low and steady. It is yours if you want it. I'm not going to hurt you. The wind picked up again, colder now, biting through the thin fabric she wore. For a second, she hesitated, her small hands clenching into fists. Then, with cautious steps, she moved forward, never taking her eyes off him, and reached down to grab the jacket. It swallowed her whole as she wrapped it tightly around her shoulders, the oversized leather hanging past her knees like armor. And in that moment, something shifted. Not trust. Not yet. But the fear, it cracked just enough for hope to slip through. The leather hung heavy around the girl's shoulders, swallowing her small frame as she clutched it tightly, her fingers digging into the worn fabric as if it were the only solid thing left in her world. And for a moment Jake said nothing. He simply watched, his sharp eyes scanning her face, the way her lips trembled, the way she kept glancing past him toward the empty road, not at him but through him, like she was waiting for something to come back, something she knew was not finished yet. And that was when he understood that whatever she had run from was not far behind. Hey, he said softly, his voice low and steady, careful not to push. You are safe right here. But the words did not land the way he hoped. Her head shook again, slower this time, her voice barely above a whisper. They said they would find me. And that single sentence settled into his chest like a weight he could not ignore. Jake shifted slightly, keeping his movements deliberate, controlled, every instinct he had learned over years of surviving dangerous places telling him to assess, to prepare, to expect the worst before it arrived. He glanced again at the ground. The tire tracks cutting off the road were not old. The edges were still sharp, not yet softened by wind or time, and the footprints, too many, too scattered, told a story of chaos. Not a simple accident, not a child wandering off. This was pursuit. This was escape. What is your name? He asked gently, giving her something simple to hold on to, something human, something grounding. The girl hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly as if measuring whether he deserved the truth. Then finally, quietly, "Lily," she said, and hearing it seemed to change something in the air between them. Because now she was no longer just a frightened child. She was someone real, someone specific, someone who mattered. "All right, Lily," Jake replied, nodding once. "My name is Jake." He did not add the nickname, did not add anything that might make her pull away again. Just Jake, simple, steady. The wind picked up again, colder now, and Lily pulled the jacket tighter around herself, her small body shivering despite the heavy leather. Jake noticed the way she favored her right leg, the slight, uneven shift in her stance, not broken, but hurt enough to slow her down enough to explain why she had not made it far. "Does your leg hurt?" he asked, and she nodded quickly, biting her lip as if even admitting it might make things worse. Jake exhaled slowly, his mind already mapping out the next steps. They were at least 2 miles from the nearest gas station. No visible houses, no traffic, just an empty stretch of highway cutting through open land. Calling for help would be the right move, but waiting out here, exposed, with whatever had chased her possibly circling back, that was a risk he did not like, not one bit. Then Lily flinched suddenly, her head snapping toward the distance behind him, her eyes wide again, fear flooding back in full force. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, and Jake did not turn immediately. He listened first, the wind, the faint rattle of dry brush, and then beneath it, low and distant, the unmistakable hum of an engine. Far off, but coming closer, his jaw tightened, and without thinking, he shifted his position just enough to place himself between Lily and the road, not touching her, not crowding her, just there, a barrier, solid and unmoving. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. Not a command, not harsh, but firm enough to carry weight. Lily moved without arguing, her small hands gripping the back of his shirt now, the leather jacket draped over her like armor. And Jake felt it then, that familiar shift inside his chest, the one he had spent years trying to bury, the instinct to protect, to stand his ground no matter what came next. The sound of the engine grew louder, no longer a question but a certainty. Something was coming back down that road. And this time, Jake was not going anywhere. The sound grew steadily, no longer a distant echo but a low, deliberate hum rolling across the empty highway. And Jake did not need to turn around to know exactly what it meant. Engines like that did not wander. They came with purpose. He kept his eyes forward, scanning the open stretch ahead while every sense sharpened behind the stillness of his posture. Lily's small hands tightened against his back, her fingers clutching the fabric of his shirt, as if letting go would pull her back into whatever nightmare she had escaped. Her breath came fast and uneven, and he could feel the tremor running through her, not just from the cold, but from recognition, from certainty. "It is them," she whispered, her voice barely holding together. And that was all Jake needed to hear. He slowly rolled his shoulders once, loosening the tension in his muscles, the way he had done before fights he never wanted but always finished. His gaze flicked briefly to his Harley-Davidson parked a few yards away, the black frame gleaming under the pale morning light. Then back to the road, calculating distance, timing, options. There was no cover out here, no buildings, no trees thick enough to hide behind. Just open land and a straight line of asphalt that left nowhere to disappear, which meant one thing: if they were coming, they would see him, and if they saw him, they would have to make a choice: slow down or push through. And Jake had no intention of moving. The engine's sound grew louder, clearer now, the faint outline of a vehicle forming in the distance, a dark shape cutting through the horizon. Lily pressed closer behind him, the oversized leather jacket slipping slightly as she shifted, and without looking back he reached one hand behind him just enough to steady the edge of the jacket around her shoulders. A small gesture, automatic, grounding. "Stay right there," he said quietly, his voice calm, controlled, as if the world was not closing in around them. The vehicle approached faster now, the hum turning into a growl, tires biting against the road as it came into full view. An older pickup truck, dark-colored, dust streaked along the sides, moving too fast for a casual drive, too direct for coincidence. Jake's eyes narrowed slightly, tracking every movement, every subtle shift in speed. And then about 50 yards out, the truck slowed, not stopping, just enough to study, to assess. The driver remained. Behind the tinted windshield, impossible to see clearly, but Jake felt the weight of that stare all the same, measuring him, judging whether he was a problem or an obstacle, and for a long second a world seemed to narrow to that single line between them. Man and machine, stillness and motion. Lily's grip tightened again, and he could feel her trying not to cry, trying to stay silent, trying to disappear behind him. And that effort alone told him everything he needed to know about what she had been through without her saying another word. The truck rolled closer, now within 20 yards, the engine idling lower, heavier, as if waiting for signal. Jake shifted his stance just slightly, planting his boots firm into the dirt, his frame square, unyielding, not aggressive, not escalating, just present. Just enough to say without words that this line would not be crossed easily. The wind picked up again, carrying dust across the road, and for a moment the truck hesitated, the engine, revving once, a low warning growl that echoed across the open land. And then something changed. The front wheels turned just a fraction, not enough to commit, but enough to reveal intent, a test, a probe, seeing how far they could push before resistance came back. Jake did not move. Did not step aside, did not even blink. He simply stood there, a wall where there had been none before, and after a long, stretched second, the truck eased forward again, creeping past him slowly, too slowly, the driver still hidden, the tension thick enough to feel in the air, until finally the vehicle rolled by, continuing down the road, not stopping, not turning around, just moving on, and only when the sound of the engine began to fade did Jake allow himself to shift his weight. Just slightly, his eyes still tracking the truck as it disappeared into the distance, because he knew better than to believe it was over. And behind him, Lily's grip loosened just a little, but she did not let go, and neither did he move away. The truck's sound faded into the distance, swallowed by the open road and the restless wind, but Jake did not relax, not even for a second. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon long after the vehicle disappeared, because men who came looking like that did not simply give up. They circled back. They waited. They chose a better moment. And behind him, Lily shifted slightly, her small body still pressed close. The tension in her grip easing just enough for him to feel it, but not gone. Not even. Close. Are they gone? She asked quietly, her voice fragile, like if she spoke too loudly the answer might change. Jake took a slow breath before answering, choosing his words carefully. For now, he said, and that truth seemed to settle between them heavier than a lie ever could. He finally turned slightly, just enough to look at her without stepping away. Her face was pale beneath the dirt, her eyes red from crying, but sharper now, alert, watching him in a way that was different from before, still cautious, but no longer pure fear. Something else had crept in. Something like searching, like she was trying to understand why he had not moved, why he had stayed when it would have been easier to ride away. They will come back, will they not? She asked, and Jake did not answer right away, because he did not deal in promises he could not keep. Instead, he crouched down again, lowering himself to her level, the same way he had before, slow, deliberate, giving her time to adjust. Listen to me, Lily, he said, his voice steady, grounding. Right now, what matters is getting you somewhere safe. She shook her head quickly, panic flashing again. No, they said if I went to the police, they would find me faster. The words tumbled out, rushed, tangled with fear, and Jake felt that familiar tightening in his chest again, the kind that came when things were worse than they first appeared. This was not just a child lost on the road. This was someone who had been controlled, threatened, taught to fear help itself. He glanced back toward the direction the truck had gone, then to his bike, then back to her, weighing the risks. Staying here was not an option. Waiting was worse. But moving her, especially with her injured leg, carried its own dangers. He studied her stance again, the slight favoring of one side, the way she held herself stiff to avoid pain, not broken, but strained, manageable if done carefully. Can you walk if I help you? He asked, and she hesitated, her lips pressing together as she considered it, then gave a small nod, uncertain but willing, and that alone told him everything about how desperate she was to get away from whatever had been chasing her. Jake stood slowly, extending his hand but stopping short of touching her, letting her choose, always letting her choose. After a moment she reached out, her small hand slipping into his cold, trembling, but holding on. He adjusted his grip carefully, supporting without pulling, guiding her toward the bike. Each step slow, measured her, breath hitching slightly with the movement. But she did not stop, did not complain, just kept going, driven by something stronger than pain. When they reached the Harley-Davidson, Jake paused, looking down at her. "We're gonna ride," he said, keeping his voice calm. "I will take it slow. You just hold on to me, all right?" She looked at the bike, then back at him, fear flickering again, but not the same kind as before. This was uncertainty, not terror, a different thing, something that could be worked through. "Okay," she whispered, and Jake nodded once, then carefully helped her onto the seat, making sure the jacket stayed wrapped around her, her small arms hesitating before finally wrapping around his waist. Light at first, then tighter as she settled. He could feel the slight shake still running through her, but also something else, something steadier, something beginning to take shape. Jake swung his leg over the bike, his hands settling on the handlebars, and for a brief moment he closed his eyes, just 1 second, grounding himself, making the decision final. Because once he started moving, there was no turning back. The road ahead stretched long and empty. But somewhere behind them, danger was already turning around. And this time, Jake intended to stay 1 step ahead. The engine roared to life beneath them, the deep rumble of the Harley-Davidson cutting through the quiet morning like thunder rolling across open land. And Lily flinched at first, her arms tightening instinctively around Jake's waist as the vibration traveled through the seat. But he did not move right away. He kept the bike steady, letting her adjust, letting her feel the rhythm of it, his voice low over his shoulder, calm and controlled. "It is just noise, that is all. You are safe." And after a few seconds, her grip shifted, still tight, but no longer panicked, just holding on, trusting enough to stay. Jake eased the throttle gently, the bike rolling forward slowly onto the empty highway, the tires humming against the asphalt as they began to move, not fast, not reckless, just steady, controlled, every movement deliberate. He kept his speed low, mindful of her injured leg, mindful of the fact that this was not just a ride, this was escape. The wind pressed lightly against them, tugging at the oversized leather jacket wrapped around Lily, but she held it close, her face pressed against his back, hidden from the open road ahead. And for a while, neither of them spoke, the miles stretching quietly as the landscape passed in long, empty lines, broken only by scrub brush and distant fences. But Jake's mind was anything but quiet. It worked through possibilities, routes, distances, the nearest place with people, with cover, with safety. A gas station about 2 miles ahead, small, usually quiet, but it would have eyes, cameras. Witnesses, better than open road, better than waiting. He checked his mirrors briefly, once, twice, the row behind them still empty, but he did not trust that. Not after what he had seen, not after the way that truck had slowed, measured, decided. Those were not men who gave up easily. Lily shifted slightly behind him, her voice small but clearer now, carried by the wind. "Where are we going?" Jake kept his eyes on the road. "Somewhere with people." He answered, simple, direct, no false promises. She was quiet for a moment, then, "They do not like people," she said, and that sentence alone told him more than any explanation could. These were not just threats whispered in fear. These were rules she had been taught, patterns she had learned to survive. Jake's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "That is exactly why we are going there." The road curved gently ahead, and he leaned into it carefully, keeping the movement smooth so she would not lose balance. Her arms tightened again during the turn, then relaxed as they straightened out. The sun was rising higher now, casting long shadows across the highway. And for a brief moment, it looked almost peaceful, almost normal. But Jake knew better. Peace like this was fragile, temporary, the kind that shattered without warning. And then, in the distance behind them, something appeared in his mirror, small at first, just a shape, but moving faster than anything else on that road had been all morning. His eyes narrowed slightly, focusing, tracking. The shape grew larger, darker, familiar. His grip on the handlebars tightened just enough to register. Not panic, just readiness. He did not say anything right away, did not want to send fear back through her again unless he had to. But Lily felt it anyway. Children always did. She shifted slightly, her head, lifting just enough to look past his shoulder. And the moment she saw it, her body went rigid, her fingers digging in his shirt again. "They found us," she whispered the fear back, sharper now, more certain, and Jake exhaled slowly, steadying himself, because now there was no more guessing, no more waiting. The truck was coming, faster this time, closing the distance with intent, and Jake rolled the throttle a little more. The engine responding instantly, the bike surging forward with controlled power, not reckless, not out of control, just enough to gain space, just enough to stay ahead, his mind shifting into that familiar state again. The one that had kept him alive in worse places than this. Calculate, adapt, protect. The gas station was less than a mile ahead now. He could see the sign rising above the road, faded but visible. And that was where they needed to be, not because it was safe, but because it was safer than anywhere else on this empty stretch. "Hold on to me." "Lily," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the wind, "do not let go." And this time, she did not hesitate at all, her arms locking around him, her small frame pressed tightly against his back as the distance between them and the danger behind them began to close, and the road ahead was running out. The wind roared louder. Now, as the Harley surged forward, the engine's deep thunder echoing across the open highway while the distance between them and the gas station shrank with every passing second. And Jake's eyes stayed locked on the road ahead, calculating every movement with precision. But behind that focus, something else stirred. Something older, something buried deep beneath years of silence and steel, because the way Lily held on to him, the way her small arms wrapped tightly around his waist, as if he were the only thing standing between her and the world breaking apart. It pulled at a place inside him he had tried to forget, and for a brief moment the road in front of him blurred, replaced by another road, another time, another small pair of hands that had once held on to him the same way, trusting without question, believing without doubt. And he had failed her. The memory hit sharp and sudden, like a blade sliding between ribs. The hospital hallway, the sound of machines, the silence that followed when they stopped, his daughter's face pale and still, a moment that had never really left him no matter how far he rode or how loud the engine roared. And now here he was again, another child behind him, another chance standing in the space between what he had been and what he could still choose to be. Jake tightened his grip on the handlebars, grounding himself in the present, because there was no room for ghosts right now, not with the truck gaining behind them. The mirror confirmed it. Closer now, faster, the gap shrinking with intent that could not be mistaken, and Lily felt it too, her grip tightening again, her voice trembling against his back. "They're coming faster," and Jake nodded slightly, even though she could not see it. "I know," he said, his voice steady. Anchor, the gas station sign, loomed closer now, the faded letters just ahead, a cluster of old pumps and a small building sitting alone off the side of the road, no more than a few hundred yards away. Safety in numbers, or at least the illusion of it. Jake adjusted his speed carefully, not pushing too hard, not drawing attention too early, but enough to stay ahead, enough to control the approach. The truck behind them roared louder, the sound aggressive now, no longer testing, no longer cautious. They had decided, and that decision meant everything was about to change. Jake leaned forward slightly, his voice cutting through the wind again. "Lily, listen to me," he said, calm but firm. "When we stop, you stay close to me. Do not run. Do not let go, no matter what happens." She nodded against his back, her voice small but certain this time. "I will not let go." And that answer landed differently, not just fear now, but trust, fragile, new, but real. The gas station rushed toward them, the gravel lot opening up ahead, and Jake guided the bike off the highway, the tires crunching as they rolled in. He slowed quickly but smoothly, bringing the bike to a controlled stop near the pumps, his head turning slightly, scanning. 2 cars parked near the building, an older man inside behind the counter, a flicker of movement through the window, witnesses' eyes, exactly what he needed. Jake killed the engine. The sudden silence hitting hard after the roar, and for a split second, everything felt still, too still. Lily's arms remained locked around him, and he reached back gently, helping her slide off the bike, careful of her injured leg, keeping her close at his side, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, not forcing, just there, grounding, present, and then the sound returned, louder now, closer, the truck pulling into the lot behind them with a harsh grind of tires on gravel. No hesitation this time. No circling, just straight in. Jake turned slowly, placing himself between Lily and the approaching vehicle, his posture calm, controlled, but unmovable. The truck came to a stop a short distance away, engine still running, the low rumble vibrating through the air, and for a moment nothing happened. The door did not open. The windows remained dark, but the tension thickened, pressing down on everything around them. Jake's eyes stayed fixed, waiting, ready, and then, finally, the driver's door creaked open, and the next part of the story began. The truck door opened slowly, the metal creaking in the quiet like a warning drawn out on purpose. And Jake did not move, not even a shift of weight. He simply stood there with Lily just behind his side, his presence steady, grounded, unyielding, as a man stepped down from the cab, tall, broad, his boots hitting the gravel with deliberate weight, his face partly shadowed by the brim of a worn cap. But there was nothing uncertain the way he moved. This was not someone asking questions. This was someone who believed he already owned the answers. His eyes flicked once to Jake, then past him to Lily, and in that single glance Jake saw it. Recognition, possession, not concern, not relief, something colder, something that tightened every instinct inside him. "There you are," the man said, his voice rough, almost casual, like he had just found something misplaced, not someone who had been afraid for their life. Lily's hand gripped tighter into Jake's shirt, her small frame pressing closer, and Jake felt it, that shift again, the one that turned hesitation into certainty. He stepped half a pace forward, enough to block the line of sight. Not aggressive, not escalating, but clear. The man's gaze returned to him, sharper now, assessing. "That your kid?" the man asked. And Jake's expression did not change, his voice calm. "Even, she is under my protection right now." The words hung in the air, simple, direct, and for a moment the man said nothing. Then he let out a short breath that might have been a laugh, might have been something else entirely. "You do not want to get involved in this," he said, tone shifting, not loud, but edge now, the kind of edge that carried history behind it. Jake did not respond immediately, his eyes steady, reading every movement, every shift of the man's shoulders, the way his hand hovered, just a little too close to his side. Not reaching, but ready, always ready. The door of the gas station creaked open behind them, the older man from inside stepping out halfway, his eyes moving between the two men, uncertain, sensing tension without understanding it, and that presence changed the space. Not enough to stop what was coming, but enough to shape it. The man from the truck noticed too, his gaze flicking briefly toward the witness, calculating, adjusting, then back to Jake. "She belongs with us," he said more firmly now, and Lily shook her head behind Jake, her voice small but urgent. No, I do not." And that was the moment everything shifted, because now it was no longer unspoken, no longer implied. It was clear, and Jake felt the last piece fall into place inside him apart. That decided without hesitation, without doubt. He took a slow breath, then spoke, his voice still calm, but harder now, grounded in something that did not move easily. "She said no," he replied, and the man's jaw tightened slightly, the first crack in his control. "You do not understand what is going on here," he said, stepping forward one pace, testing, pushing, seeing how far he could go. Jake matched it with stillness, not retreating, not advancing, just holding the line. "I understand." "Enough," he answered, and for a brief second the world seemed to narrow again. The space between them charged, the gravel beneath their boots, the only ground separating two very different intentions. The wind carried dust across the lot. The gas station sign creaked overhead, and somewhere in the distance a car passed on the highway. Unaware of the moment, building just off the road, Lily's fingers tightened again, her trust no longer hesitant now, but anchored. She stayed behind him without question, and Jake felt it. Not just responsibility, but something deeper, something that had been buried for years, rising back to the surface with quiet force. The man from the truck shifted again, his patience thinning, his eyes hardening. And in that moment Jake knew this was not over with words. This was only the beginning of something much bigger. And this time, he was not walking away. The man's patience snapped in a way that was quiet but unmistakable, his jaw tightening as his eyes flicked once more toward Lily, then back to Jake, and this time there was no attempt to soften it, no attempt to pretend. "You are making a mistake," he said, his voice lower now, heavier, carrying a weight that suggested consequences rather than warnings, and Jake felt Lily shift slightly behind him, her fingers gripping tighter, her fear returning in waves, but different now. No longer alone, no. Longer isolated, anchored to something solid in front of her, and Jake did not raise his voice, did not change his tone, but something in his posture hardened, something settled. "That might be," he said calmly, "but I am not stepping aside," and the words landed with finality, not aggressive, not loud, just absolute. The man stared at him for a long second, measuring, calculating, and then he took another step forward, testing again, pushing the boundary just a little further. And Jake held his ground, unmoving, his boots firm in the gravel, his shoulders squared, a quiet wall that did not break. And behind him Lily pressed closer, the oversized leather jacket wrapped tight around her small body. Her face hidden, but her presence undeniable. And that was when the man's gaze shifted again, not to her, but to the jacket, to the patch on the back that marked Jake for what he was. Recognition flickered there, brief but real, and something in the man's expression changed. Not fear, but caution, the kind that came when a situation was no longer simple, when it carried weight beyond what was expected. "You really want to do this?" he muttered, more to himself than to Jake, but Jake heard it, and he answered anyway, "I already did." And that was the moment the tension shifted again, not breaking but deepening like a storm building instead of passing. The man exhaled slowly, then glanced back toward the truck, and for the first time Jake noticed movement inside. The cab, second figure, partially hidden, watching, waiting, and that confirmed everything. This was not just one man acting alone. This was organized, deliberate, something planned. Lily's voice came again, barely a whisper, "There are more," and Jake gave the smallest nod, acknowledging what he had already seen, already understood. The older man from the gas station stepped a little closer now, hesitant but concerned, his voice uncertain as he called out, "Is everything all right out here?" And that presence, that question, added another layer to the moment, because now there were witnesses, now there were eyes that could not be ignored, and the man from the truck knew it too, his posture shifting slightly, recalibrating, weighing risk against outcome. He looked back at Jake one more time, longer this time, as if committing the face to memory. Then his gaze dropped briefly to Lily behind him, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, colder. "This is not over," he said, not as a threat shouted in anger, but as a fact stated with certainty, and Jake did not respond because he knew the same thing, knew it down to the bone. This was only the beginning. The man took a step back, then another, turning slowly toward the truck, and for a moment it seemed like the storm might pass without breaking. But Jake did not relax, did not shift, because men like that did not walk away without a reason. And sure enough, just before he reached the door, the man paused, his hand resting on the handle, and without turning back he added, "You cannot protect her forever." And then he climbed into the truck, the door slamming shut with a heavy final sound. The engine revved again, louder this time, more aggressive, and the truck pulled away from the pumps, gravel spitting from beneath the tires as it turned sharply and headed back toward the road. And only when it disappeared once more down the highway did the tension release just enough for the air to move again. Lily's grip loosened slightly, but she did not step away, and Jake finally shifted his stance, turning just enough to look down at her, his voice quieter now, but no less steady. "We are not staying here," he said, because he knew one thing for certain. Wherever safety was, it was not going to be found in a place they had already been seen. The gravel settled slowly after the truck disappeared, the sound of its engine fading into the distance. But the weight it left behind did not go with it. It lingered in the air, heavy, pressing, and Jake could feel it in the way Lily stayed close. Not moving, not speaking, just holding on to the edge of his shirt like letting go might bring everything back again. He looked down at her for a brief second, taking in the way she kept her eyes low now, the way her shoulders curled inward despite the jacket wrapped around her, and he knew that standing still was not an option. Not here, not anymore. "We need to move," he said quietly, his voice steady, and she nodded without hesitation this time. The trust no longer fragile, but forming, piece by piece, built on every moment he had not walked away. Jake turned slightly toward the small building of the gas station, the older man still standing near the door, watching them with concern, unsure but aware enough to know something was wrong. Jake guided Lily forward, keeping his pace slow to match her injured leg. Every step careful, controlled. When they reached the entrance, the man spoke first, his voice cautious. "You folks need help." Jake gave a small nod, not explaining everything. "Not here, not now. I need to use your phone," he said direct. The man stepped aside immediately, holding the door open, and the shift from open air to the inside space felt almost unreal. The faint hum of refrigeration units, the smell of coffee and old wood, normal things, safe things. But Jake did not let that fool him. Safety was temporary, always temporary. Lily stayed close to him, her eyes scanning the room, as if danger might still be hiding in the corners. Jake moved toward the counter, picking up the phone mounted beside the register, his fingers steady as he dialed. Not rushing, not hesitating, the line rang once, twice, then a calm voice answered, and Jake spoke clearly, giving location, giving just enough detail to bring help without creating panic. "There's a child here who needs assistance," he said, his tone even controlled. He did not use words that would escalate things unnecessarily, but he made sure the urgency was understood. When he hung up, he turned back to Lily, crouching slightly again to meet her at eye level. "Someone is coming," he told her. And for a moment she just stared at him, searching his face, and then she asked the question that had been building since the beginning. "You are not leaving, are you?" And that question hit deeper than anything else had so far, because it was not about the men in the truck. It was about everything she had already lost, everything that had taught her that. People did leave. Jake held her gaze, steady, grounded, and answered without hesitation, "No." And this time there was no room for doubt in his voice. None at all. Lily's shoulders lowered just slightly, the tension easing in a way that was almost invisible, but real. And for the first time since he had found her, she let go of his shirt, not stepping away, but standing on her own, still close but not clinging. And that small change spoke volumes. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling something loose against the side of the building. And Jake's eyes shifted instinctively toward the window, watching the empty road beyond, because he knew this was not over. The man had said as much, and men like that did not make empty statements. They followed through. Always the older man behind the counter cleared his throat softly. "You think they will come back?" he asked, his voice lower now. Concerned, Jake did not look away from the window as he answered. "Yes," he said simply. No hesitation, no softening, and the truth of it settled into the room like a quiet storm waiting to break. Lily followed his gaze, her small face reflecting in the glass. And though she did not speak, the fear had not returned the same way. It was different now, not paralyzing, not consuming, because she was no longer facing it alone. And Jake remained where he stood, between her and the world outside, knowing that whatever came next, it would not be simple, it would not be easy. But one thing was already decided: he was not stepping aside. The quiet inside the gas station did not last long. It never did in moments like this, because tension had a way of pulling something toward it, and Jake felt it before he saw it. The shift in air, the subtle change in sound outside, and his eyes locked onto the window again, just as the distant hum returned, low at first, then rising, unmistakable. The truck was coming back, not circling, not hesitating, coming straight in, faster this time, committed, and the older man behind the counter froze, his hand gripping the edge of the register as his eyes widened. "That them?" he asked, his voice tight, and Jake gave a small nod, already moving, already thinking ahead. "Stay inside," he said firmly, not as a suggestion, but as a line drawn. And then he turned to Lily, crouching in front of her again, his voice lowering, grounding. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, holding her gaze, making sure she heard every word. "You stay behind the counter with him. Do not come out unless I tell you. No matter what you hear." Her eyes widened, fear flickering again, but she did not argue. She nodded, her voice small but steady. "I trust you," and those 3 words landed heavier than anything else in that moment. Jake gave a slight nod, then stood, turning toward the door as the sound outside grew louder, the truck pulling into the lot again with a sharp grind of gravel. More aggressive now. No pretense left. No attempt to hide intent. Jake stepped outside before they could come. In, controlling the space, controlling the moment. The morning light hit him as he moved into the open, his figure framed against the small building behind him. And the truck came to a hard stop just yards away, dust rising around it, the engine revving once before settling into a low growl. And this time, both doors opened, 2 men stepping out, not rushed, not chaotic, but deliberate, coordinated, and that confirmed it. This was not just intimidation. This was escalation. Jake stood still, his posture relaxed but ready, every line of his body communicating the same thing. "You do not pass." The first man stepped forward again, the same one from before, but now with backup, his confidence sharper, reinforced. "You should have kept riding," he said, his voice louder now, carrying across the lot. And Jake did not respond immediately. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of the moment settle. Because sometimes silence said more than words ever could. The second man lingered slightly, to the side, watching, scanning, positioning himself in a way that suggested they were used to working together, used to controlling situations like this, and Jake took that in, adjusted, recalculated. 2 of them, open space, limited cover, but still witnesses inside, still a boundary they could not easily cross without consequences. The first man took another step closer, pushing again. "Last chance," he said, his tone harder now, less patient, more direct, and Jake finally spoke, his voice calm, even, but carrying something solid beneath it. "You are done here." And that was it. No raised voice, no threat, just a statement. And for a split second, the air seemed to tighten around them, the wind picking up again, dust swirling across the gravel. The men exchanged a brief glance, something unspoken passing between them. And then the second man shifted, stepping forward just enough to test the space, to see if the line would break under pressure. And Jake did not move, not an inch, not a fraction. He simply held his ground, unshaken, unmoved, and that stillness forced a decision. The first man's jaw tightened, frustration bleeding through now, because this was not going the way it was supposed to, not as easy as they had planned, not as controlled. And then, from inside the building, the faint sound of voice carried through the door, the older man speaking. On the phone, louder now, urgent. And that changed everything, because now time was no longer on their side. The men heard it too, their posture shifting slightly, the edge of hesitation creeping in, not fear but calculation, risk versus reward. And Jake saw it, recognized it, and held it, letting it grow, letting it push them toward the only decision they could make without crossing a line they could not undo. The first man exhaled sharply, stepping back once, then again, his eyes never leaving Jake's. "This is not finished," he said, the words tight, controlled, but no longer dominant. And Jake did not answer, because he already knew that. And then, just like before, but faster this time, both men turned, climbing back into the truck, the doors slamming shut, the engine roaring as it pulled away hard, gravel spraying behind it as it sped back onto the road, disappearing once more into the distance. And only when the sound finally faded did Jake allow himself a slow breath. But even then, he did not relax, because now it was certain, whatever this was, it was not going away. Not easily, not quietly. And inside the building, Lily waited, trusting him to stand between her and everything that was coming. And Jake knew, without a doubt, that this was only the beginning. The silence that followed the truck's departure felt heavier than the confrontation itself, like the air had been stretched too tight and had not yet settled back into place. And Jake stood there for a moment longer, eyes fixed on the empty road, watching the space where danger had just disappeared, not trusting it, not believing in easy endings, because he had lived too long to mistake retreat for surrender. And only when he was certain the immediate threat was gone did he turn and step back toward the gas station door, pushing it open slowly, the small bell above it chiming softly, almost out of place after everything that had just happened. Inside, Lily stood exactly where he had left her, Near the counter, the oversized leather jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, her small hands gripping the edge of it. But when she saw him, something changed in her face, not relief in the way most people would show it, but something deeper, quieter, something that had been building since. The moment he did, not walk away. "You came back," she said, her voice soft, almost disbelieving, and Jake paused for just a second before answering, because those words carried weight, more than she probably knew. "I told you I would not leave." He replied, simple, steady, and this time, she believed it fully, not because of the words, but because of everything he had already done. The older man behind the counter let out a slow breath, the tension finally easing from his shoulders as he set the phone down. "Sheriff is on the way," he said, his voice still a little shaken, but stronger now, anchored by action, by the idea that help was coming, and Jake nodded once, acknowledging it, but his eyes shifted back to Lily, taking in the way she stood now, still close, but not hiding, not shrinking the way she had before. The fear was still there, but it was no longer in control, and that mattered more than anything else in that moment. Jake stepped a little closer, careful, measured, not crowding her, just closing the distance enough to be present. "You did good," he said quietly, and she blinked, as if the word surprised her, as if she had not expected anyone to say that. And for a second, her lower lip trembled again, but this time she did not break down. She held it together, stronger than before. Outside, the wind moved against the building again, a low, steady sound, and somewhere in the distance, faint but growing, the sound of approaching sirens began to rise, not loud yet, but enough to be heard, enough to signal that things were changing again. Lily heard it too, her head tilting slightly, her eyes lifting toward the sound, and for the first time, there was no immediate fear in her reaction, just uncertainty, and she looked back at Jake, searching his face again. "That is the police," she said, not asking, just confirming, and Jake nodded. "Yes," he answered, watching her carefully because this moment mattered. This was where trust could break or hold. And she hesitated, just for a second, the memory of what she had been told, what she had been made to believe, flickering across her face. But then she looked down at the jacket around her shoulders, her fingers tightening around it. And when she looked back up, something had changed again. Something stronger. "They will not take me back, right?" she asked, and this time, Jake did not just answer with words. He reached out slowly, placing his hand lightly on her shoulder, steady, grounding. "Not while I am here," he said, and there was no hesitation in his voice. None at all. And that was enough. Lily nodded once, a small movement, but certain. The sound of the sirens grew louder now, closer, echoing across the open road, and the older man moved toward the door, peering outside, relief and concern mixing in his expression. "They're almost here," he said, and Jake straightened slightly, his posture shifting again, not defensive now, but ready for the next part, because this was not just about holding a line anymore. This was about what came after, about making sure that what had almost happened did not happen again, about turning a moment into something lasting, something real. Lily stepped just a little closer to him, not clinging, not hiding, just choosing to stand there beside him, and Jake glanced down at her briefly, then back toward the door, where the sound of the sirens finally pulled into the lot. And for the first time since the morning had begun, there was something like a pause in the storm, not an ending, not yet, but a moment to breathe before whatever came next. The wail of the sirens cut through the air as the patrol car pulled into the gravel lot, followed closely by a second vehicle, dust swirling around their tires as they came to a controlled stop near the pumps. And for the first time since the morning had begun, the tension shifted into something structured, something official, but Jake did not mistake that for safety. Not yet. Not after what he had seen. The doors opened and two deputies stepped out, their presence calm but alert, hands near, their belts, eyes scanning the scene before settling on Jake and Lily. And one of them, a tall man with a steady expression, approached slowly. "Sir, we got a call about a situation here," he said, his tone professional, measured, and Jake gave a slight nod, stepping just enough to the side, so Lily remained partially shielded behind him but still visible. Not hidden, not invisible. "She needs help," Jake replied simply, not over-explaining, not complicating what needed to be clear. The deputy's eyes moved to Lily, taking in her condition. The oversized jacket, the dirt on her face, the way she held herself close to Jake but not clinging, and something in his expression softened just slightly. "Hey there," he said gently, lowering his voice as he crouched a bit to her level. "You are safe now, all right." And Lily hesitated, her eyes flicking briefly to Jake before returning to the deputy. And that small movement did not go unnoticed. Jake gave her the smallest nod, a silent reassurance, and after a second, she nodded back, not fully relaxed, but willing, and that was enough to begin. The second deputy moved toward the gas station owner, speaking quietly, gathering details, while the first aide focused on Lily and Jake. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked, looking between them. And Jake answered first, keeping his voice calm, steady, recounting only what he'd seen, what mattered. A child alone on the road, injured, afraid, followed by a truck that had returned twice. No speculation, no assumptions, just facts. The deputy listened carefully, his expression tightening slightly as the picture formed. "You get a look at the plate?" he asked, and Jake shook his head once. "No clear view," he said, and the deputy nodded, filing it away. Then he turned his attention fully to Lily, his voice softening again. "What about you, sweetheart? Do you know those men?" And for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, because this was the moment where everything could either come out or stay buried. Lily's fingers tightened around the edge of the jacket, her eyes lowering as she struggled with something internal, something taut, something enforced, but then she glanced up at Jake again, just for a second, and whatever she saw there steadied her. They said I had to stay with them. She whispered, her voice shaking but clear enough to be heard, and the deputy did not interrupt, did not rush her, just waited, giving her space, and slowly, piece by piece, the story began to surface, not in full, not yet, but enough to understand that this was not a misunderstanding, not a simple situation. And as she spoke, Jake remained exactly where he was, not speaking, not stepping in, just present, just steady, the way she needed him to be outside. The second deputy moved back toward the patrol car, speaking into the radio, his tone more urgent now, relaying what they were hearing, and that shift did not go unnoticed. The situation was growing, expanding beyond this small gas station. Beyond this moment, the first deputy stood slowly, nodding once as he looked at Jake. "You did the right thing bringing her here," he said, and Jake did not respond verbally, just gave a slight nod, because he was not thinking about what was right, he was thinking about what came next, about the fact that those men were still out there, still moving, still planning, and the deputy seemed to understand that without it being said, "We're going to make sure she's taken somewhere safe," he added, and Lily's head lifted slightly at that, her eyes flicking between the two men, uncertainty creeping back in just a little, and Jake saw it immediately. He crouched again, bringing himself back to her level, his voice low, steady. "I am right here," he said, and she nodded, holding on to that, holding on to him, even as everything around them began to shift into something bigger than either of them had expected. And outside, the sirens had stopped, but the echoes of what had started were only beginning to unfold. The tension inside the small gas station slowly unraveled as the deputies continued their work, their voices calm but focused as they gathered details, spoke into radios, and coordinated what would happen next. And for the first time since the morning had begun, the situation no longer felt like it was balanced on the edge of something unknown. It was moving forward, structured, controlled, and Lily stood quietly near Jake, the oversized leather jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, but her grip on it had softened, her breathing steadier now, her eyes no longer darting toward every sound outside, because the fear that had once filled every part of her had been replaced by something else, something quieter, something stronger, and that was trust. The first deputy returned from speaking with his partner, his expression firm but reassuring as he knelt down again to Lily's level. "We are going to take you somewhere safe," he said gently. "There are people who will help you make sure those men cannot come near you again." And this time, Lily did not immediately pull back. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes lifting toward Jake once more, searching, not for permission, but for confirmation, and Jake met her gaze, steady, grounded, and gave a small nod. "They're here to help," he said, his voice calm. "Certain?" And that was enough. Lily nodded slowly, her fingers loosening from the jacket as she took a small step forward toward the deputy, not leaving Jake entirely, but moving with a confidence that had not been there before. And that small step marked something important, something that had been built piece by piece since the moment she had first backed away from him on that empty road. Outside, the deputies continued securing the scene, another vehicle arriving in the distance, not urgent now, but part of the growing response. And Jake remained where he was, watching, not intervening, just making sure everything unfolded the way it should. The deputy stood and gestured gently for Lily to follow. And she did, her steps careful because of her leg, but steady. And just before she reached the door, she stopped, turning back toward Jake, her eyes clear now, no longer clouded by panic. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft but sure. And for a brief second, Jake did not respond. Not because he did not hear her, but because something in that moment reached deeper than he expected, deeper than he had allowed anything to reach in a long time. He gave a small nod, his expression unchanged on the surface, but something behind it had shifted. Something quiet but real. "You're going to be all right," he said, and this time it was not just something to say, it was something he believed. Lily gave one last nod, then turned and walked with the deputy out into the morning light, the leather jacket still wrapped around her shoulders like armor, like proof that not everything in the world took. Some things gave back. Jake watched as she was guided toward the patrol car, the deputy opening the door for her, helping her inside carefully, making sure she was comfortable, making sure she felt safe. And when the door closed, it felt like the end of something that had begun hours earlier on an empty stretch of road, but also the beginning of something else, something better. The engine of the patrol car started, not rushed, not chaotic, just steady. And as it pulled away from the gas station, carrying Lily toward a future that no longer belonged to fear, Jake finally exhaled, a slow, measured breath he had been holding longer than he realized. The wind moved across the lot again, quieter now, less harsh, and he turned back toward his bike, the Harley-Davidson waiting where he had left it, unchanged, reliable. And as he reached for it, his hand paused briefly on the worn leather of the seat, his jacket gone, still with her. And for the first time in a long time, that did not feel like a loss. It felt like something given where it was needed most. Jake swung onto the bike, the engine coming to life beneath him once more, but this time the sound carried something different, not escape, not distance, but closure. And as he rode out of the lot and back onto the open road, the horizon ahead no longer felt empty, because somewhere behind him, a little girl was no longer running, and that was enough.